This is Terry White, author of the Better Minneapolis newsletter and podcast host. I'd like to invite you to become a paid subscriber. You'll gain access to the archive, exclusive live chats, and happy hours. Most importantly, you'll be supporting this reader-supported effort to bring news and commentary focused on Minneapolis to a broader audience. Thank you for listening to today's interview. Well, hi. Today I'm here with Jean Massey. Am I pronouncing that right?
That's
Yep.
right.
Okay, great. And so I invited Jean to talk to me today because, as most people know, the upcoming election will use ranked choice voting. And she's one of the biggest advocates. So I wanted to get her take on things and explain a little bit about what people should expect. So hello.
Hello, Terry. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So you're part of Fair Vote Minnesota. Would you just like to give a little background of yourself?
Sure. Jean Massey, I'm the executive director of Fair Vote Minnesota, and I've played that role ever since Minneapolis was voting back in 2006. I initiated and led that campaign in Minneapolis and started the journey of ranked choice voting in Minnesota.
So that was one of my questions. You said 2006. I think we met 2017. So I guess I didn't realize how long did it take to get ranked choice voting on the ballot? If you started in 2006, how did you kind of go about getting the system changed?
Conversation started back in 2004 when the League of Women Voters statewide did an exhaustive study of alternative voting methods and ended that study process with a strong recommendation for ranked choice voting at a local and state level. And it was nearly unanimously supported across all the league chapters in Minnesota. So with that as a springboard, and we already knew it was an idea that was coming out of the Bay Area in the early 2000s. And I think a lot of people were starting to get this idea of instant runoff voting. It was called back in the day, now ranked choice voting, as a solution to the spoiler problem that states and nationally we were experiencing, it from presidential elections like Gore v. Bush to gubernatorial elections across the country, including in Minnesota. So people were starting to think about, is there a solution to a problem that we're experiencing? And this idea took off since then. So now, not just in Minnesota, where we have it in 5 cities, it's in use in 50 plus jurisdictions around the country, including 2 states, Alaska and Maine. And I can take a deep dive on kind of that growth, but that's over the past 20 or so years that we've seen that kind of explosion in this pretty simple idea. And the reason it has taken off, I believe, is because it offers real solutions to real problems in our local democracies and on our state democracies, and because it's achievable. It's doable, it's implementable, and we're seeing very successful uses across the country.
So to get it in the city of Minneapolis, was that a charter amendment or?
It was a charter amendment. So let's go back to that year. So in 2004, we started many conversations with local leaders and local political leaders, as well as community leaders, about whether or not this idea might just be of interest in Minneapolis. And I worked with Fair Vote at the time. I knew that they were working on these kinds of reforms. And so we had many meetings with Fair Vote. We had the support of the organization. And by we, I mean just a collection of community volunteers back then. And then we made it a plan, a strategy to seek the input and support of candidates running for Minneapolis City Council in 2005. If you recall that election year, it was a pretty reform-minded year. We had elected Elizabeth Glidden, Ralph Remington, other people who were running in that year were elected to City Council, and we advocated during the campaign year for their support. So we knew upon the new City Council in 2006, if we would have the votes to move this forward. We did. We had 9 City Council members out of the 13 vote yes to put it on the ballot, but we weren't going to take any chances. While we did all of that, we led a petition signing campaign and collected over 5,000 signatures to put it on the ballot as well.
So that's a little bit before my time. I moved here about 2007. I think. So all that would have happened before I got here. Was there any particular event that kind of got the conversation going? And my guess is maybe it had something to do with candidates like Ralph Nader, who I supported in the past, and a lot of people blamed him and the Greens for what happened in Florida. And, I think the math showed that he took enough votes from Al Gore that Al Gore would have easily won Bush, if I have my history right. So Greens, third parties in general, took a lot of heat because of stuff like that. Did that play a part, you think, in the movement building steam, or were there other reasons?
No, absolutely. I think that was probably the biggest spark.
Yeah.
Because everyone understood the problem through a presidential race. Everyone votes in the presidential, right? Relatively speaking. So everyone was experiencing what just went wrong. Now let's fast forward to 2016. The same thing happens all over again. All the math shows that third parties took enough votes away from Hillary Clinton in key swing states to deliver the Electoral College vote to President Trump.
And
So
that was that Jill
today.
Stein?
That was Jill Stein, and there was a libertarian, maybe one other candidate, and collectively, those votes they showed would have transferred to Hillary if we had that system, similar to Gore v. Bush. But it wasn't just the spoil. It was like, now we have a Supreme Court deciding who's our president, right? And so people were just scratching their heads. And certainly it gave lift and voice to a reform like this and getting it off the ground. And I think that was the interest of the League of Women Voters to study it. It's like it was already starting as a potential reform to solve some pretty significant problems.
Yeah, I know. So I worked in the Green Party in New Mexico, and at one point we were actually approached by Republicans who wanted to give us money because they basically wanted to keep the party going because they felt like it helped their chances. And so that was a big internal discussion, I guess, as to whether or not to accept that money, because we wanted to be a party, we needed money, but also we didn't like being cast in the spoiler role.
But these are the dynamics that are incentivized. By necessity, political parties play these games on both sides.
Yeah.
Because they can. We have a system of plurality voting that allows for spoiler dynamics to always come into play. And if they view it advantageous, they'll set the game up. We saw that several times in Congressional District 2 here with Angie Craig and that kind of manipulation.
Well, I'm not familiar with the history. But...
So it was the 2016 race, her first time she ran, and there was a strong Green Party candidate at the time who I believe had upwards towards 20% of the vote. Don't get me, I forget these data points, but it was significant enough to hand the election to her opponent, who was a Republican. Second time around, there were still spoiler dynamics, but she moved up in the polls and she survived that spoiler dynamic.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens again.
So we'll talk a little bit about the city versus the state dynamics, but I think I wanted to take an opportunity. I'm probably most people listening know how ranked choice voting works, but I was wondering if you could just explain it so that people feel comfortable when they vote this year what's going to happen.
Sure. It's important to highlight what ranked choice voting accomplishes at a local level in these nonpartisan races. Importantly, it eliminates the need for a separate primary election and combines two elections in one. In November, when turnout is significantly higher and more diverse, because you just get a whole new electorate making that decision, one decisive day. In the old primary system, back then, it wasn't even August, it was September. 5% in a good year, maybe 10% would come out in the primary. Okay. So it didn't reflect the overall population. It was always older, whiter, and more wealthy.
So Minneapolis did have a primary at one point.
Correct.
Not kind of like our the whole caucus thing now, not super well attended. Now, when they did that primary, was that to say winnie the field down to the top 4 candidates? Was that to get in top 2? So it wasn't related to the DFL endorsement. It was just to, and could the others, like if you were number 3 or 4, could you still run, or were you just not allowed on the ballot?
No. The purpose of a public primary is to winnow the field. So in a nonpartisan election, it's always double the number of seats to fill. So if it's a single seat, it's top 2. But if you jump to the park board where we have 3 at large, 6 could advance.
Okay.
Right to the general election.
Two.
Always double.
Then I did not know
That's
that.
right. That's right.
Okay.
That's where you have the competition. So then you get down to 2 in the general election, and invariably it would be a campaign filled with attacks. It's to the advantage of a challenger to throw attack ads out to criticize unfairly candidates. And so we saw campaigns that were very negative. It doesn't mean negativity goes away in ranked choice voting elections. It's there. PACs and independent expenditures in particular still play that game.
Mm-hmm.
But candidates are incentivized under ranked choice voting to campaign for second choice votes. And so you don't want to alienate that support by attacking their first choice candidates.
So going back to like the primary before, did Minneapolis have kind of this tradition? Like I looked yesterday, there's 15 different people running for mayor. Was that still the case when they were doing primaries, or
sure.
Because
long ballots on primary for mayor in Minneapolis?
Okay.
So
this isn't like a new thing where we get a lot of probably not viable candidates running. This has been like going on for a long time in Minneapolis.
It has, and people didn't make any kind of commentary about it. They just saw it was a long list and had their favorite, and etc. Under ranked choice voting, it's very similar. People aren't paying attention to a list of 20 candidates. They're paying attention to the top list they hear on the radio, see on TV, get mailers from.
Or read about in a newsletter, right?
Right. Read about it in the Terry White's newsletter. Exactly.
Yeah.
So voters, we hear this a lot, that ranked choice voting has created this very long ballot. And we have just known in our own surveying and data analysis that voters figure it out, and 90% or more vote for the top candidates, ignore the rest. But for those who want to vote for some candidate without viability, they have that choice. That's what ranked choice voting offers.
Well, I'm disappointed I didn't see Captain Jack Sparrow on the list of running for mayor. So
the first time we had an open mayor's race under ranked choice voting, he became the headline.
Yeah, well, I mean, I enjoyed his presence. He would show up at forums and things in full costume. But just to go back to like what do people expect when they see the ballot? What do they do? I think one of the advantages is that your vote is counted no matter who you vote for, right? So I think that if you could just explain that a little bit, like what do I do with my pen when I go in there?
Sure. So for voters who are presented with a ranked ballot, you mark your first choice, and that first choice is the candidate you share the most value with, you really love beyond any other candidate, and you want to express that vote. If that candidate is not widely shared with other voters, you've got a backup option. So you rank a second choice, believing that, boy, if my first choice is eliminated in the runoff, then I have another vote that can count, or my vote continues to count, rather. And if my second choice is eliminated, my third choice can count. And that's how that works. So rather than doing a separate runoff, by ranking, we can do the instant runoff process. So in the tabulation on the back end, what happens to your ballot is it is piled up with all the first choices. And if your candidate is eliminated, your vote now counts for your second choice. If there's still no winner with 50% of the vote, then another round of tabulation occurs. If your second choice is still in the running, your second choice counts in that third round of tabulation. So rounds of tabulation happen until one candidate hits that threshold of majority, or until 2 candidates are standing and the one with the most votes wins.
I think that is important to explain because I feel like in the last couple of elections, people have been confused as to the tabulation, right? And I know, like in Ward 8, which we're at Clancy's Sandwich Shop. I'm not sure if we're in Ward 8 or...
We're in Ward 8.
Okay, Ward 8. Should know that. It took a really long time for the count to come in because it was so close, and I think it went till after midnight. And I think a lot of people wondered why it took so long to tabulate. Is it just because it has to be done by hand, or what?
There have been great advances on the tabulation. So in the first open mayor's race in 2013 with a long ballot, and it went to many rounds of tabulation, the city used a spreadsheet. They, for the first time, used a spreadsheet system, which has gotten consistently more efficient over the years. But what they mean by that, they take all of the ballots and they entered in that information into a spreadsheet rather than manually tabulate the ballots.
Mm-hmm.
Now, today, they can use what we call a cast vote record. So the cast vote record,
cast
vote record is good information for people to have. It's a record of how everyone voted.
Right.
So if there are 120,000 votes that come in this year, there'll be 120,000 rows of information, 3 columns wide, how everyone ranked their ballot in the mayor's race.
I've seen that.
And then you take that Excel spreadsheet basically, and you import it into a spreadsheet where the tabulation process then happens. But it's all manual still because we don't have certified equipment in Minneapolis to do automatic tabulation. So they use spreadsheet method, which means they combine all like rankings. So all people who voted A, B, C are lopped together. And if A drops, all those ballots are reallocated to B at the same time. So it goes pretty swiftly.
Mm-hmm.
And we should have results for most of the races by early afternoon on election day this year.
So obviously and I know what happens at the city is different than what happened at the DFL convention, right? But when you're talking about putting the votes into spreadsheets and some manual tabulation, I can't help but think about all the complaints that came out of the DFL convention around tabulation and what happens in the back room and all that. What assurance do you think people should take away that there's no manual manipulation of those spreadsheets when they're being manually counted?
I'll put a hard separation between those two.
I know they're very different entities.
And we can circle back to the endorsement process, but set that completely aside for the moment. We're talking about one of the best run election departments in the entire country, the Minneapolis Elections Department. They are top notch. And when they were asked to implement ranked choice voting, being one of the initial cities, they innovated and stepped up to the moment and have done a stellar job, have won several awards for the kind of work that they have really put into this. It is fully transparent. So what you will find on the Minneapolis website are the cast vote records. First, you'll get election night results. So if there's a winner in round 1, they had 50% or more of the vote, election is declared. You have all that information on election night. If not, the tabulation's done the next day. And they put all those rounds of tabulation up on the website as soon as they have them. So you can see exactly how many votes were in the first choices, how many votes were reallocated in the round of tabulation, and how that winning number emerged. It is so transparent. If there were any errors, you could correct them. And then what happens in any election department is that any sequence of events in tabulation always has safeguards. There's never just one person doing it. 2 people are doing the job at all turns to make sure that if something happens and an error emerged, that would be caught. So you've got 2 eyes on every step of the process. And then, of course, you have the auditing and certification that happens as we do for any election.
Mm-hmm.
So voters should have full faith and trust. And what I'm excited about is that after so many now implementations since the beginning, there have been no errors. And no one has complained. No one has filed litigation against the city.
Right.
It has been a a huge success. And then with the other cities using it in in Hennepin County, they've emulated the system that Minneapolis has put into place. So all the cities doing this, while we don't have automated tabulation yet, and I'll come back to that, they all do it very efficiently, very quickly the next day.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the graphics that they do online because, Board 8 was a real outlier last time around. But the graphics that the city election department does explain it very well. So.
Yep. And now others put up those kinds of graphics too. They really want the public to have faith, and they go the extra 9 yards to make sure that they're delivering to the public everything up front so that they don't get any kinds of questions like that. But it's not just Minneapolis. This is how it's done around the country. Full transparency, great information to the public. And I credit ranked choice voting in the introduction of it to giving voters more information, giving the public more information about election results. It really has forced kind of the cities to do what they could be doing with any election. And now Minneapolis, once they invested in the kind of education, both online and engagement in the community, they continue to do that in every election cycle, not just ranked choice voting cycles. A point on that, on the tabulation. Most cities that use ranked choice voting, and of course in Alaska and Maine, they have electronic certified voting.
Are those two of the big other states that use it?
Those are the two big states.
And do they do it statewide or okay?
They do for presidential included.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's why it's so key. It really is a game changer if we can get it for statewide elections. So most of the voting equipment now have built-in tabulation systems, ES&S, HART, Dominion. Those are the three biggies. But you can also use a separate module called the ranked choice voting tabulation tool. And that just imports the cast vote records and automatically tabulates those rounds of tabulation.
And how does mail-in votes, absentee ballots, early votes, how do all of those get fed into the system?
Same way for every election, not just ranked choice. Those are rules no matter what kind of method you're using. We have a law in Minnesota where we must have election ballots in by 5 o'clock on election day. And then they feed those in to the machines, high-speed machines.
So if I wanted to, though, I could just put my top vote, right? Like and then if that person doesn't get on to the next round, then I'm kind of what they call disenfranchised, right? Then my vote just kind of goes nowhere.
But that's a voter's choice.
Yeah, that's a voter's choice.
If you really just have one person, you don't care who wins. After that, you stay home. If that person wasn't on the ballot, fine. It's a voter's choice to do what they want with the ballot. But we encourage ranking. We want to make sure people understand the impact of ranking just one person.
Yeah. No,
and if they do it and understand, great. But if they do it and don't understand, then we get disappointed. We really want to make sure they know the value of ranking.
And the flip side is true as well. If my number one choice is the leading candidate, my number 2 and number 3 are never counted.
Correct.
Right.
So it's actually a smart thing to do. If you know your candidate, a popular incumbent, for example, is likely going to be in the final round. Mm-hmm. You intuitively know that. So the incentive to rank is less than, doesn't look like my candidate's doing so well in the polls. I better have a second choice.
Yeah.
That logic certainly prevails.
So let's talk about some of the advantages. I think you mentioned that it encourages candidates to play a little bit nicer, right? I think one of my sticking points with it is that I feel as though it creates this whole level of strategy that candidates have to use to get those second choice votes that maybe detracts from them just going out and being able to campaign for themselves. Does that make sense? So, like in this election, there's a lot of effort and time going into trying to just tell voters the top 3 candidates they should pick for mayor, as opposed to like if I were the candidate, just being able to go out there and say, vote for me. It's really simple. Do you think that has potential of distracting candidates or confusing voters at all?
No, all evidence points to 2 things. One, on the candidate side, candidates, once they start campaigning under a ranked choice voting style, say, well, it is so alleviating to not have to tell voters that I won't talk to them. So candidates run for a reason. You were a candidate, so I know you can appreciate this. You want to talk to all the voters as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go and knock on a door and they tell you, well, I'm sorry, I'm voting for someone else, do you have any reason at all to call them back or go back to their door? No, you basically ignore them. And then when you govern, you can ignore them too, because you're not going to have the vote when you go out for re-election. But under ranked choice voting, candidates can say, oh my gosh, well, of course, I appreciate where your vote is at, but this is ranked choice voting and I'd love to earn your second choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to get to know you. What do you care about? And when you take office, you have all that more information. That makes for good campaigning and it makes for good governance. That's on the candidate side. Voters say, oh my gosh, all these candidates are talking to me. This is so fun. So no, voters, and then of course they know they get to rank and they're evaluating their ranking. And I can tell you in this kind of mayoral election atmosphere we have in Minneapolis, people are evaluating exactly like for a while how they're going to rank. No one is super certain yet. How some are, but there are a lot of conversations happening. We have 4 candidates or more.
15
in total. But the 4 that are getting the stage are diverse enough where people are thinking, I really have a choice here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, because you mentioned the word stage, and I think that's one of the things that is tricky about, and this would happen whether it was ranked choice voting or not, but how do you determine who gets to be on that stage? To me, one of the benefits of a primary would be to narrow the field so that final month of the election, if there's forums, debates, you've only got the top few candidates, even if it's like the top 4, so that they can actually fit on a debate stage. So like now, someone's going to have to arbitrarily figure out of the 15 people running for mayor, if there's a forum, who actually gets to be on the stage and talks to voters.
That's a common critique under ranked choice voting or under a traditional election. Who I think I hear 2 questions here. How to determine who gets the spotlight. Most of the time they use whether or not you've raised a certain amount of money, where you're falling in the polls. In other words, if you decide to put your name on the ballot, are you campaigning? Because if you're not, then I'm not going to give you a stage. That's fair. Those kinds of thresholds, I think, are appropriate and fair. 2, we don't have to have all candidate forums to have proper forums. I think we need to be more creative. Again, ranked choice voting or not.
What do you mean by that? What's an alternative?
You could do pairings. You could say, today we're going to pair up these 2, right? And the next day we'll pair up these 2. And then next cycle we'll pair up these 2. So you can do pairings. You can do a more meet and greet style. You could say, rather than having 25 questions, we're going to take a deep dive with each of you on 2 issues. See how you think, see how you want to govern around these 2 issues. But we don't. We get I don't know if you saw Tane Danger's piece in the Star Tribune critiquing the way we do candidate forums. I think he's spot on. And I think we should get more creative in how we're communicating out to the public what these candidates stand for. Mm-hmm. And I would encourage that. So, and if there are several candidates who aren't polling well or aren't campaigning in a significant way, but we want to give voice to them, there are other ways that we could do that. Interviews with people like you on podcasts, etc. It doesn't have to be spending time in WCCO studio, right? So there are different ways we can do that.
So do you think, one of the benefits that is touted for the system is that it encourages more people of color, more women to run for office. Do you think ranked choice voting's been successful at that?
I love that question. I want to come back to because I want to hit a point. Your second question in the previous conversation was narrowing the candidate field down to two. So it becomes binary and a kind of an easier choice for voters. I would argue completely differently. I can say, knowing the conversations I'm having in the community, just in this current mayor race, if it came down to simply a contest between Mayor Jacob Fry and Omar Fatme, it became that binary without more voice and more choice in that process perspective, people would not be happy with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to just be binary. I mean, you could get down to the top 4 or 5, or I mean, pick a number, I guess. Let's say there's 3 spots on the ballot. Maybe 6 candidates get the top 6, right? And how do you narrow it down? I mean, I've just been to some of these forums, and I didn't read the danger article. But it's a joke. You can't really understand what the candidates are saying. They get 1 or 2 minutes on like very difficult topics, and there's 10 people up there. And I think it's frustrating for candidates. I think it's frustrating for people who are there to learn about the candidates.
Well, I agree. Those kinds of candidate forums are tiresome for people. We can get more creative on how we approach those rather than reintroduce a primary.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we're talking about high cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars of primary cost to set up in Minneapolis. No one turns out. Mm-hmm. So sure, it's a way to narrow the field, whether it be top 4 or 6, whatever, but you're reintroducing low turnout and high cost. And I'd rather manage the candidate forums better than do that.
Okay. So what about is it accomplishing that goal of getting people of color, women to run more? Or is ranked choice figuring into their calculation now?
Absolutely. It has become a big accelerant for diversity in every way. So as soon as it's introduced in a community, we see much higher numbers of candidates who are diverse, ethnically, even politically, and of course, gender run because of RCV. They see their chances rather than fitting through the small eye of the needle in a primary. They can run all the way to November and get their voice out there. So it changes who decides to run. It changes how people are campaigning, and it can change who wins. Mm-hmm. And from New York City to Utah, to New Mexico, to Minneapolis, across the country, we are seeing more women, more people of color run and win. Mm-hmm. It's just that straightforward. The data show that.
So is ranked choice voting only used in nonpartisan races?
So that's the jump to state use.
Okay.
Because in most states, elections are partisan, not nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Around the country, mostly have nonpartisan elections, with the exception of a big city like New York City. So you saw RCV very successfully deployed in the recent primary, and they have a Democratic and Republican primary there. Mm-hmm. So with the thinking that was the decisive election, but now that New York is probably going to have a more crowded general election for mayor, that'll probably lead them to have conversations about putting it into the general election as well.
Yeah. Well, so I have a couple questions. One, I'm of mixed feelings about encouraging, because I was a Green, and so I'm very much in favor of like third parties, alternate voices getting heard in the elections. But at the same time, I feel like maybe it makes people think they have a shot of winning when they really don't, or maybe we get too crowded a field and it detracts from being able to hear what the main candidates are, the most likely candidates to win are saying, but at the same time, I want independents and I want Greens and, whatever other parties might crop up to be successful and have a way of voting. However, like at the state level, you've seen they've actually changed the laws, so it's harder to become a third party or to have a different party. So while ranked choice voting maybe works with the supposedly nonpartisan races in the city, seems like the parties are making it harder on a state level to actually have other parties.
Yeah, it'd be much better if the parties had decided to just adopt ranked choice voting and have a very healthy way for multiple parties to participate in our democracy. Yeah. That's what we should be doing. That's what we're advocating for at the state legislature, is for use of ranked choice voting in our partisan races. So we'd use it in the partisan primary. We'd use it in the partisan general election, and all parties go. So if the Green Party had a competitive election in the primary, you could use ranked choice voting, right? It would even incentivize more candidates, even in the smaller parties, to run more candidates. You can, right? Normally, though, you have a candidate you want to put forward, but it means that all those parties are on the general election ballot, competing under ranked choice voting. And of course, you wouldn't have 15. It would be the handful of parties that we have in Minnesota. Either you collect signatures or you qualify because you're a major party. So while the threshold increased, collecting signatures is still a way to get onto the ballot. And so as soon as we have ranked choice voting, we will see more parties and voices really participating in that process.
So does that mean that efforts are underway to try and roll this out on a state level? Is that what I'm
Fairvote, Minnesota has a very active strategy eventually to have a statewide bill for ranked choice voting. After the 2022 election, we had a bill that would create a task force to study and look at that opportunity. That didn't make it all the way through. There was a study bill that did emerge out of that session that asked the Secretary of State to evaluate voting methods and voters' experiences under different voting methods. That just concluded. Mm-hmm. And a top recommendation in that study is from that the Secretary of State prioritize the ranked choice voting local option bill. So it's not the statewide approach yet, but we want to make sure that we get the local option bill passed as quickly as we can. And it's been probably in every biennium since Steve Simon was first in the House. It was his bill initially, and we still haven't gotten that passed. And it's important to pass that bill for three key reasons. One, it puts standards in state law for how ranked choice voting is conducted. Right now, it's in city ordinances, but we don't have a statewide standard. Two, once we do that, we'll have rules for how we use ranked choice voting in even years. And I know that's one of your questions, because right now there are no rules for how to put ranked choice voting on a ballot concurrently with state and federal offices. And third, with those standards, we can certify equipment so we can have automatic tabulation. And even though we don't have that yet in Minneapolis and the other cities in Hennepin County with ranked choice voting this year, we'll do the spreadsheet method. St. Paul has been manually counting ballots rather than using the spreadsheet system. But this year, they're going to use the universal tabulator, we call it the RCV tab, to automatically tabulate the results. So we'll see how that works.
I mean, it's kind of a side point, but it seems like if you have that spreadsheet with all three choices that people made, that you could feed that into AI and say, figure out based on these rules who the winner of this election
Precisely.
is. And
that's what this is what the software does.
Yeah,
exactly. The software is created before the advent of AI.
Yeah.
So now they can do it faster.
I think it's going to become obsolete pretty quickly.
But it's not certified. So this is important for your listeners to understand. All equipment for elections is certified, and there are certification rules in all 50 states, all different. But in Minnesota, we every time we buy new machines, they get certified. So the tabulation system that I'm referring to has been tested federally so that it can be used in different localities around the country.
So this isn't directly related to ranked choice voting, but you mentioned it, the idea of moving our city elections to even years so that they uh, more people participate, because the theory is that when it's just city elections, even with the mayor on the ballot, not as many people come out as when it's the bigger elections. And so I don't know if you favor that idea or not. I've heard several arguments against it and for it. But what listeners may not be aware of, one of the obstacles if people did want to do that is that the ballot, just the physical ballot of having ranked choice for city, but then not for state. But it sounds like you're maybe working with some people to figure that out, or what?
We're working with legislators and the Secretary of State and St. Paul right now on getting rules in place for even year use. So St. Paul voters approved that last year, moving elections to even years, implementable in 2028 during the presidential election cycle. It wasn't just even year, it was, we want local elections and presidential to maximize turnout. That was their proposal.
Yeah.
And I think the people who advocated for that were believing that the two can work together. They can. It's just simple changes in rules. Basically, the order of races that are on the ballot, because right now they're required in a certain order from presidential down to local, with judges last. So, and then how many ballot papers we need. So if we need a second ballot paper to do ranked choice voting, it would be for RCV rather than the judges. So those are the two biggies, completely reasonable to work out. So we just need to make sure we do that. And then it would allow ranked choice voting in any city that has even year use. And there are several cities that have been wanting to do this for a long time, from Brooklyn Park to Rochester to Red Wing, but they have elections in even year. So we're eager to clear up those rules and just get it all in place.
And so why are these other cities interested in doing it? Is it because they think it's going to increase the diversity of people running, or because they want to do they have primaries now that they want to get rid of, or what's the main?
They have primaries that are unnecessary, and they see the benefits at a local level that ranked choice voting has been providing to communities, and they think, well, we want to be on this bandwagon. Sounds like a good one.
So can we just talk briefly about the DFL convention, which I'm curious. I didn't know. This was the first city convention I've ever gone to. I reported on it. I didn't know they didn't use ranked choice voting. I assumed they did. And having experienced it, where you take a vote, counting takes several hours, and then you take another vote. I mean, it's just the longest process you could possibly imagine. Do you
call it misery?
Why aren't they using ranked choice voting in the DFL convention?
They can and they should. It's that simple.
Uh-huh.
But what happens is ranked choice voting rules are in the call. It's an option for rules committees to use RCV process or traditional round by round voting. And the people come together from the different campaigns. And I'm not surprised to see them come out of that doing the same old tricks.
I mean, are they just trying to inflict as much pain on delegates as possible, or what's the reasoning? Why would they not use?
You hear a lot of people grumbling about endorsing processes. This is age old. It long came before ranked choice voting, and it continues under ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting aside, and RCV doesn't have anything to do with the endorsing process. It's a political party process, that's not a public election. If you saw, St. Paul decided not to hold conventions this year. They didn't, I think, probably forecast a big need for it and decided we don't want to spend that kind of money. And
well, I do find it interesting that the city races are technically nonpartisan, yet the biggest part of it is getting the DFL endorsement. So it's like very partisan, very partisan. Right? I mean,
political parties will be political parties, and that's free association, right? Like, so, and that's really important to preserve. Whether or not parties believe endorsing processes are good for them, that's up to the party. And we don't have a position on that. What we do believe is that if they're going to hold endorsing conventions, they should use RCV to expedite the process, make people feel good about spending their time in a gymnasium somewhere. And the rules would be the RCV can finish on the endorsing process. Though.
Okay, so where were we? We had a little motorcycle interruption there.
I think we were just describing the rules for ranked choice voting and endorsing convention, which make a lot of sense. And I would just appeal to all DFL and Republican Party conventions, use these rules. So you just narrow the field to 2 using ranked choice voting.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 1 round in the back room doing the tallying. And then you ask the body, do we want to endorse between the final 2 candidates or not?
Mm-hmm.
Some will result in an endorsement, some will not. Increasingly, we don't have endorsements, but of course we did see it in the mayor's race this year in Minneapolis.
So final question, what's the future of ranked choice voting? Where's it going in Minnesota? And then also if people want more information, where should they look?
Sure. Well, I'm really excited about the new momentum around ranked choice voting for several reasons. One, we're in a political climate where people are begging to understand what's going on. How did we get here and how can we move beyond it? And I am fearful, like many, that we may see a significant shift in our political system after the attacks and dismantling of our existing system. And when we're in that rebuild mode, we don't want to build back what we had. We want to build back better. And ranked choice voting is an essential piece in that toolbox of how to do democracy better. It's just more inclusive, gives more voice, is more representative, is fair. And what we're going to see in the next generation of youth locally and potentially statewide is proportional representation with ranked choice voting.
Well, I'd love to see that. How does that work? I mean,
well, it means creating multi-member districts.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example,
I mean, I hear that, and I guess one of my concerns is that people just won't get it. I mean, that it's going to become too complicated. And I say this because, there's plenty of people out there who aren't going to vote, maybe don't have any idea who the mayor is, maybe not even the president is, and then asking them to kind of understand a little bit more complex voting methods could be an obstacle for them.
Well, what we have found when voters experience ranked choice voting is that they say just the opposite. I got it. It's because education is done. You can't throw a surprise out at people. So if they're studying who's running for president or any other election and set of candidates, they're understanding the opportunity to rank. The education is in place. And all of the surveys have shown that voters like it, understand it, and prefer it over the old way. And under the current system, the hardest thing voters struggle with is the need to be strategic. If I really vote my heart, I'm going to cost the election to a candidate I don't want to win. And that happens all the time. And it's agonizing for voters. Ranked choice voting takes all that agony away. And people feel empowered by it. They lean into it and they like it. And they don't want to go back because it really is a pro-voter system. It really is empowering to voters. And ultimately, candidates like running under the system. And with proportional representation, we have an opportunity to be more representative still. It gives more voters an opportunity to see someone elected in office that they vote for directly. And we're excited by the experience we saw in Portland, Oregon. They adopted proportional ranked choice voting. And what they did was abandon a city council body that was outdated. They have 5 council members representing the city of Portland. They said, if we can start over, what would be the best system we can design? Through a coalition process, they decided we're going to create 4 districts with 3 each in them, so a total of 12 plus a mayor. And with ranked choice voting, instead of being or PRCV, rather than being represented by a single council member, you get to be represented by 3.
So does that mean, like, if I live in District 1, I also get to vote on the candidates for District 2 and 3 and 4?
No, District 1 has a 3-seat election. It's like our park board.
Oh, so I get 3 count. I see. For
So it's
3.
like our park board.
I think that would be great. I think the park board is a good system.
Right, and it allows more political diversity on a particular council. So we're really excited by the opportunity that this will bring. I would like to see Minneapolis potentially consider that, or even St. Paul. Now that we have RCV, what would it look like if we had multi-member ranked choice voting on our city councils? That conversation could emerge, but I think we're going to see it in use in new communities around the country.
Mm-hmm. But it would take a big lift to get a new system like the kind that we see in Portland, right? I mean, you have to go through a whole new charter amendment, and
it would be similar to how we got ranked choice voting in place in the early days. It would be a ballot question to the voters. And the city council technically can pass a ballot or can pass an amendment, but it has to be unanimous, and that's pretty tough to get.
Yeah.
So usually it's a question for the voters, and I'd like questions about democracy to go to voters. Yeah, it's a pro-democracy reform, and voters like to weigh in on those questions.
Well, I want to thank you for talking to me today. If people want to get more information, do they go to fairvote.org, or is there another source?
Fairvotemn.org.
Okay.
There is a national organization, fairvote.org.
Okay.
So there's information on both sides, but we've got, in fact, for this local election, we have a separate website that has all the education you can want about the election here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Louis Park, Minnetonka, and Bloomington. It's a great website called rankyourvote.org.
Rank your
Everything
vote.
you wanted to know about what's happening right here in the Twin Cities on ranked choice voting, that's the place to go.
Great. I will include that in my newsletter. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Terry.